here for my very first video of Victober. Last year I did a video on 10 reasons I love Victorian literature, just to kind of get everybody really excited for the month. So I will link that down below. I think it is worth your while if you haven't seen it, just to think about maybe different aspects of Victorian literature to love that you hadn't thought of before. But this time I wanted to do a sort of how-to Victober video. So this being the third year, the first 2 years I did some things I really liked and I did some things I really didn't like during the month of October celebrating Victober. And I just wanted to give some helpful hints and tricks to have your best experience possible. And the very first one is to take reading breaks. So I think if you push yourself, go the whole first week reading every spare moment that you have, unless that's your thing and you normally do that, I think you will burn out soon, and then you'll be bummed because it will kind of ruin the rest of the month for you. So I would definitely recommend stepping away from books when you feel like you've had your fill, and just chilling out and doing nothing, getting a snack, or picking up a Victorian period drama and watching that to kind of have a break for a little while. But I do think it's good to kind of have the right balance with how much you want to read throughout the month, and then I think you'll have the best reading experience possible. Next, I wanted to talk about all of the resources for different ways to access books, and 3 things I wanted to talk about first, and they are ways to find out about underrated Victorian books or just books you didn't know about before. And the first, I saw Juliana from Blank Garden posted a link to the Indiana University Victorian Women Writers Project. And on this, there's a whole slew of women authors listed alphabetically, and their books are waiting for you right there online. They have put them on because they are in the public domain. They can do that. And so I will link that, of course, down below. And I think it's something that you should check out. Next is Honno Publishing. They very generously sent me several books last year, one of them being A Welsh Witch by Alan Rain, which I could not have been more enthusiastic about after I finished it. It was just an amazing book, and I want to read so much more Alan Rain and more Welsh women writers, which is why I also purchased A Burglary by Amy Dilwyn, and that is on my TBR for this year. It really spurred me on. So if you want maybe some Welsh authors you hadn't heard of, I think this would be a great resource to look into. And then also Victorian Secret Publishers, who very generously sent me Grania by Emily Lawless, who was an Irish author, but they have a whole range of authors, Irish, I assume they have some Welsh, some Scottish, and also, of course, some English, and just more obscure titles, more obscure Victorian novels that aren't published as often. But they definitely have some good options on there if you were, wanting to really branch out with your Victorian reading. And then other ways to read during this month. The first are used bookstores. I have gotten, if you go to like library used bookstores, you'll be surprised what you find. There is a particularly good one near me where I've gotten beautiful Oxford World Classics editions of Victorian novels for about $1.50. So you'd really be surprised at what you can find out there. And then just regular used bookstores are a great way to get still pretty nice, gently used copies of classics, but for a really reasonable price. Then online, Amazon, you can find really great used books, and Abe Books. I find with Abe Books, it's really nice because you can see the specific editions of the books. Amazon, it's somewhat more of a gamble, but Abe Books, I've gotten the exact edition that I requested, and I feel confident whenever I order from them that I will. Then the Book Depository. So if the edition that you have that you want is a newer one, it is going to be harder to find used on Amazon or Abe Books, but Book Depository will have it probably more affordable than others will. They do free shipping worldwide. So you do have to wait a little while. I think my books usually take around 2 weeks from them, but I have never not gotten a book from them. So I think I can recommend them wholeheartedly. So hopefully you are able to get them that way. Next is an app called Serial Reader. So this is if you really want to take your time with a classic. Like I said in my TBR video, I am reading Vanity Fair, but I am really taking my time with it. This, to me, Serial Reader is the closest I'll ever get to receiving serialized novels in the newspaper. And it's really neat because you can set the time each day that you want your installment delivered. And I think it's around 111 installments is Vanity Fair. So it's being delivered to me each day. So it makes me feel a little bit closer to the Victorian era and the way I'm consuming it. I know Olive from a Book Olive really enjoyed reading with Serial Reader before. Then in your understanding of classic novels, because they can be overwhelming, I would say Cliff Notes are really helpful. Sometimes when I get to the end of a Victorian novel that I love, I just Google essays online, and sometimes there are free essays on PDF format that you can download, and it's really fun to be able to read how other people have interpreted this novel, and you could really learn some things and glean some things that you didn't know about it before. And in addition to that, the kinds of classics, I really think Penguin Classics and Oxford World Classics have really helpful footnotes and introductions on them. And also don't forget about your local library. Those are really great places to find more books from. But speaking of introductions, one of my rules for reading classics is not to read the introduction at the beginning of my novel reading experience. I save it for the end. Even though it is called an introduction, somehow it has just been agreed upon by everyone who writes introductions that you can do spoilers in them. And I don't know why, if they're called introductions, that's just allowed. But I've just decided I will not ruin my experience by reading them until after the book. And then it's a really nice thing when you're kind of reeling and processing what you've just taken in. It's a really fun treat then to have the introduction. I would also say during this month, it's probably ideal to pick one lengthy novel to work throughout the whole month and really take your time with that. Last year, when I read Our Mutual Friend, I read it in a week and it kind of ruined my reading experience of it. I definitely still enjoyed Our Mutual Friend, but I think it would have been a new favorite Dickens. And it didn't really make it that. Whereas the year before, I took a whole month to read Dombey and Son, and it made it a new favorite. And it was just such a treat every day to get to pick it up. The same thing with The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. So I do think there are Victorian novels you'll feel more compelled to read quickly. And so you can kind of get a gauge on that. But if there's one that you're feeling kind of overwhelmed by it, I would say break it up into little chunks for each day. Even put little tabs on it if that's what you need. And I think that will be really helpful. And I think also reading in different formats can be helpful. So if you have some in audio and some via ebook, so you can read on your phone when you're waiting at a doctor's appointment and you forgot a book. But I would also just always have a physical book with you, always have some way to read. But having audiobook format can be really helpful for those little snippets of time when you're driving or when you're doing laundry, cleaning. It's just really helpful to have. And then I would also say be willing to DNF books. And I know that sounds really not appealing to some of you out there, but I am a very firm believer in DNFing. This has been my best reading year of my adult life, and it's because I have never so freely DNF'd, and I'm just done with feeling guilty over not finishing books that I know will not be favorites of mine. I'm done. I get this sort of feeling now when I start reading books, and I can kind of tell, like, okay, I think I need to be willing to DNF this. Last year, during Victober, instead of just letting it ruin my Victober, I DNF'd Phantasmion by Sarah Coleridge and The Light That Failed by Rudyard Kipling, which normally would make me sad, but then what would have happened is I would have just avoided reading altogether, and it just would have made the reading drag, and I would have not read nearly as much as I did, because then instead I DNF'd those and just moved on to great books that became new favorites. So I would really, if you can tell, not that a book is challenging, because I do take my time with challenging books, but they were books that I just wasn't interested in. And I think you can kind of tell fairly early on if the book is just really not piquing your interest like at all. Then a really fun thing that the BookTube community has done is it has made it really a lot easier to do buddy reads. And if you are a part of the Goodreads group, then that is a really great way to do it. So you can try to find people on the Goodreads group who are reading the same things you are, and you can communicate through email or Boxer, whatever you guys agree upon that you want to do. But I think that can make your experience even better. Sort of having some accountability can make it a really fun experience. Then I would say do different things to make the time cozy, to make a time that you will enjoy, and to make it just a really all-around fun experience. So having yummy snacks, having scented candles, autumnal ones if you live in the northern hemisphere, and more summery, light, fresh ones if you live in the southern hemisphere, but also having yummy beverages. So, you know, if it's fall where you are, then have things like hot cocoa if you want to go ahead and do that, but maybe even a pumpkin spice latte or tea. Coffee is always awesome. And if you are where it's springtime, then I would say that cucumber water or lemonade, which apparently the Victorians were wild about lemonade, so that is very Victober appropriate. Then I think these are things that you can do just to make it more fun. Make this as much fun as possible for yourself. And it's just quickly become like my favorite reading memories are happening during Victober. And then I do have a playlist of this year's TBRs, and I still have the playlist up from the 2017 Victober TBRs. So if you feel like you haven't quite found books you're interested in, those playlists are linked down below, and you can look at that if you want to try to find more books that you would be interested in reading. Then I am going to have a video coming out about another way to make nice reading atmospheres during this month is the music or, you know, background noise that you have on if you're into that. So that will be coming out shortly, and I hope you will enjoy it. I think I found some really fun things for the month to make it better. Then when you've finished a book, I think some great resources, like I said, read the introduction after, look up BookTube reviews, because there are a fair number of classic book reviews out there. I would also search podcasts about it. You'd be surprised, like In Our Time, put out by the BBC, did a really fabulous discussion of Wuthering Heights a few years ago, and you can still access that. But you'd be surprised that there would be, you know, discussions of a fair number of Victorian novels out there. Also, there are a few audio drama versions of Victorian novels, and that is just so appealing to me. Getting to hear a radio version of it, I think is very cool. Then also, as you're reading, feel free to Google words, Google names, Google locations. I think hearing certain places described, also, I think just the icing on the cake is then to Google a picture of it and kind of see exactly what it's like. You know, the settings from Wuthering Heights, or different ships that are mentioned, or, you know, historical events, just give you a very even richer experience while you're reading a classic, because there is a lot. They're very meaty books, and so have a lot referenced in there of things that we might not know about in this modern day and age. And then I will have a cooking video coming out later where I will be cooking something Victorian, but there's a very fun YouTube channel called the Victorian Heritage YouTube channel, which I will link down below, and they have so many Victorian recipes that they cook. So I think I'm really looking forward to it. I'm planning on listening to a Victorian audiobook while I cook this item, and I will film it for all of you lovely people. So please let me know if you have other Victober traditions now 3 years in that you have started, or ways that you think have really improved your experience. And I will see you guys for another video soon. Bye.